I'd like to acknowledge the following groups for funding the work that we're doing right now, the aforementioned work that I've been discussing. Some of these folks have been funding our various projects for years, and some of them are new to WRV and to our work because of the flood. And actually, some of these funders got involved specifically because of the dam removal. So I want to acknowledge that and thank them. And I guess with that, I'll take any questions, and we can also talk a little bit about careers and certainly what's worked for me. I'd be happy to share that with you and chat a little bit. Did you have a question?
I got several questions, but
okay.
Dealing with funding, because you had mentioned earlier that you have done quite a bit of funding yourself, trying to come up with methods for doing some of that work you were doing. But do you guys have like a dedicated grant writer?
We do.
You do?
Yeah, we have a development director which is basically a grant writer. And she, fundraising is her specialty, but we all kind of work with her on our various projects. So
when you were going around fundraising, were you going to those organizations, or were you going to like private citizens? Were you?
Well, we're responding to grant application or grant announcements, requests for proposals, basically. And so if you want to go back to that slide, Colorado Water Conservation Board opened up a ton of funding that was authorized by the state legislature after the flood. This was kind of our seed money, which kicked it off. Some of these other funders, like Trout Unlimited, State Forest Service, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, they all had RFPs out in the last year, which we applied for. And there's nothing like removing a dam to really make your application attractive. But yeah, I work on that aspect of things quite a lot. I seem to be pretty good at it.
On a percentage basis, how much fundraising do you think you did?
10 to 20%. I like it, actually. Most people don't. I think it's fun. I kind of enjoy the process of. I like writing, and feels really good to get an award letter. So I think it's enjoyable. Most people hate grant writing, but there's not much else I'm good at, so I'll take it.
I got a couple other basic dealing with the methods that you guys do. Are there ways to revegetate riprap? And then my other one kind of dealing with the same thing. Are there any potential of restoring beaver to help your work?
Good questions. So the question was, is there any way to revegetate riprap banks? And then there's also a question about beaver. So in answer to the riprap question, yes, there is. It's just going to be a little bit more variable in its success. One of the concepts that we're really pushing and advocating for is if you need to build riprap to protect a structure or a road, which, that's fine. Sometimes you have to. We're trying to get folks to build their projects with soil on top of it. And this is called buried riprap, where the riprap is offset. If this is the road corridor, instead of building the riprap on the river channel over here, you would offset the riprap into the road embankment and put fill material, so soil, in other words, in here, and then you have your channel right here. That way, even if all of this erodes during a big flood, you've got this fail-safe to protect the road, and you've got this, mineral soil with hopefully some organics in it that you can potentially revegetate. We've also planted willows straight into riprap. There's soil in amongst the riprap, and in my experience, it often works. The official answer is no, it doesn't work, but willows are really, really tough. And they can grow kind of in spite of all of the academic literature saying that they can't, which should hopefully generate more new academic literature. And then the second question was about putting beaver back into our streams. There's a concept called beaver mimicking, where we put these large mounds of fill dirt filled with logs and stuff into streams to kind of mimic a beaver dam. And that technique is gaining popularity all across the country. In fact, oftentimes we see that once you build these beaver mimicking structures, real beavers will come wandering around, find these structures, and be like, oh, this looks kind of like home, and build actual beaver dams on top of the mimic structures. In terms of relocating problem beavers to areas like this, it's not going to happen in the Big Thompson. There's just too much urban infrastructure, but we're interested in both relocating beavers and doing the beaver mimicking structures at Campbell Valley, which is a site that we work on, year after year. It's kind of an adopt site, which has a lot of problems. But right now we're working on getting the vegetation established so that there's enough food for the beaver to move in there, because right now there's just not enough of a food source, which is a bit of a catch-22, because if we could actually get beaver structures in the stream and get more floodplain infiltration, then the food source would be there like that, and we could have beavers. So yeah, we're working on it. All across the country that is identifying it, beavers are identifying themselves as the singular keystone fix to all of these watershed problems, and there's a lot of faculty members at Oregon State, Utah State, and Colorado State who are really campaigning for this and writing papers about it and pushing. So the short answer is yeah, we're the wheels are starting to turn. We're getting there. I'm getting a little short on time here, so does anybody want to chat about career opportunities? Okay, so I'll be brief and then I'll take questions. But there's really, in my mind, there's three main categories for career opportunities in this field. One of them is federal and state, so any government agency. Another is private consulting, and then the third is going to be nonprofit organizations. So from the top, government positions are definitely going to be well paid and probably, a little bit more cush. There also can be hard to get. If you are ever offered a full-time government position, take it. I've had several friends that are like, oh, my girlfriend and I want to stay in Fort Collins, and I'm like, if you got a position offered to you with a federal agency, please just take it, and you'll be happy. They are pretty hard to get, and I won't get into that. The second is consulting. You'll work really hard in consulting. In the private sector of science, you're really competing against other consultants. It's always getting more work, doing it faster. What's that? And cheaper, yeah. That's a rough life, but you can also, if you're good at it, you can make decent money in this field in consulting. A lot of field days, a lot of days away from home for sure, but that's kind of comes with the territory. And then the third is nonprofit, which is where I'm at, which I think, there are certainly some awesome things about being having a government job or being a consultant, but some of the things that I really like about working for a nonprofit is, well, number one, we're eligible for all this different kind of grant funding because we don't profit, right? So there's all of this public money available for us, and if you're at all good at writing, you can probably be good at grant writing, and if you have a background in science and you're decent at writing, then you're definitely going to be good at grant writing. Private landowners seem to be more willing to work with nonprofits. I've got a lot of people who like working with me just because I don't represent the government. And I think I also have a lot of freedom and autonomy to explore ideas which are of interest to me, whereas if I was kind of railroaded into a federal job or, working for a consulting company which was, chasing the dollar, I wouldn't necessarily have that freedom. How many of you guys have had a job in your field so far? All of you. Okay, good. What were some of your experiences?
I did non-for-profit for a while.
Okay.
Nature Conservancy.
Awesome. Yeah. Very cool.
And I've done utility work, and I've done the private sector as well.
Okay. Cool. What about some of the rest of you?
I worked for about 5 different nonprofits, whether it was Youth Corps or the Mono Lake Committee in California, which was all about streams and restoration there. And, kind of dealing with the Los Angeles DWP and how they robbed all the streams to, build this 350-mile culvert, opening culvert down to Los Angeles. From the Sierra Nevadas. So it's mostly been nonprofits with me that I've tried to get into the government, permanent world, and know how difficult that is.
Right. What about the rest of you?
I worked for the NRCS for about 3 years.
Okay, great.
Would like to get somewhere with the Forest Service now.
Yeah, good luck.
I've applied for a bunch of jobs.
Right.
I worked for the National Park Service.
Cool.
I worked for just seasonally with the Forest Service.
Okay, great. Well, the hardest part is getting the first one on your resume. So it sounds like you guys have gotten past that hurdle. So good for you. I guess my advice for folks just trying to get that first job on their resume, those of you listening in, is be willing to do something that's not very cool. My first job with the Forest Service in undergrad was not fun at all. It was very repetitive. It was really boring. I hated going to work every day. But at the end of the semester, they hired me on their field crew for the summer. I also actually left school for a year and moved to Washington because I was offered a job with a tribal fisheries agency, and all my professors told me it was a bad idea. They said, don't drop out of school, finish school. And I took time off. I took time off from school and worked for a year and got really, really good experience on my resume, and then I came back to school. So, not being afraid to move anywhere, move to the middle of nowhere in Nevada for a field job, you got to put your time in. There's really no way around that. You're not going to have the cush American dream lifestyle until you've really put your time in somewhere. And I learned a lot at the Forest Service, and I learned a lot working for Yakima Fisheries, but a lot of it was not fun. I was freezing my butt off and getting rained on, and it definitely had to make a lot of sacrifices. But now I have a job which allows me to kind of live in a cool town and have a little bit more of a professional lifestyle, so you got to put your time in. I would strongly suggest, on that note, I'd strongly suggest taking a look at the Indian tribes in this country. I think they're often overlooked. They are government jobs. They're just not the same government. Most of our big Indian tribes have federal sovereignty, and that means they have their own forestry department, their own fisheries, wildlife, all kinds of stuff, rangeland. It's like a whole other world up there on the Indian reservations that exists within American boundaries, but they're just their own agencies, and they're often overlooked. So you can get on the net and look at a lot of the tribes in the Pacific Northwest have a page on their webpage with job openings in forestry and fisheries and rangeland, wildlife. Does anybody have any questions? Well, cool. Sounds like you guys have some pretty impressive notches in your gun belt as far as job opportunities. So, good for you. And, you know, just market the snot out of that. Going to conferences and talking to people. You know, it's kind of like the dating game. Just like don't be shy about walking up to people and talking to them and telling them who you are and what you're interested in. You know, the squeaky wheel really does get the grease, and you know, you're not going to do yourselves any favors by not talking to people, other professionals, and you're not going to do yourself any favors by trying to stay in the same spot. Just move around the country. Like, it's, yeah, you have to chase these opportunities, and if you have to move to a weird rural town somewhere for a while to work in your field, then it'll probably pay off and, you know, come full circle and allow you to live somewhere more attractive in the future.
So how did this positioning in WRB come to be?
My position was created after the flood, specifically to work on flood stuff. So we got some seed money from CWCB, which initially paid for my position. And I guess I made a place for myself, and yeah, I was offered a permanent position to stay. So my feedback loop happened, you know, pretty quickly. I'm not that old, so I spent 2.5 years working for the Forest Service and a year working for Yakima Fisheries, and you know, both experiences certainly had their highlight, but weren't, you know, both experiences were also really hard and demanding and not fun at times. And I think I was pretty fortunate that, you know, I got out of that seasonal game and was offered a full-time position really quickly. But, you know, that's certainly not always the case.
So get your skill set ready and then wait for a natural disaster.
That's not bad advice. You know, we're seeing these huge hurricanes and wildfires. You know, when the next one of these things happen, you might want to, like, you know, let's just say like California wildfires that are going on right now. You might want to see what kind of watershed councils and coalitions are popping up in response to those fires out there in Oregon and Washington and California. You know, all the watershed coalitions on the Front Range just hired 2 staff members each, 1 coordinator position and 1 assistant, and they're decent jobs with full benefits. You know, it took a year after the flood to get the funding mechanisms in place for those positions, but, you know, checking out local groups like watershed councils and coalitions is also, there's all kinds of different groups up and down both coasts and in Colorado. You know, there's a big, Oregon, Washington are huge hotspots for restoration. If restoration's your thing, I would look into both of those states, certainly California and Idaho and all the western states. I think the eastern states are often really ignored, but there's a huge stream restoration community in North Carolina, and there's a huge restoration community in Maryland in the Chesapeake Bay that is, you know, has been built over the last few decades in response to all the environmental issues that they've had in the Bay. So Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland, lots of stuff going on over there. Up in Maine, with all the Atlantic salmon issues, lots of stuff going on up there. So I think a lot of those eastern states get overlooked when people think about potential career opportunities, but there's some really cool stuff going on back east that I wish I could be involved in.
So we should go around chasing disasters like lawyers chase accidents?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's not a bad piece of advice. I would definitely keep your eyes out for the next one.
I'd also add, like, Luke works for a volunteer organization, and volunteering is a great way to get experience and to make connections. But you don't necessarily only have to volunteer with volunteer organizations. So you can call, if there's a federal office in your town, for you guys, there's every federal office in Fort Collins. You can call them and see if they have any opportunities for you to volunteer. You can call different groups like the collaborative groups he was talking about, the Big Thompson Restoration Coalition. They've used, CSU students have contacted them and volunteered and done pretty high-level types of things. So you can, city, state, local governments as well. So that's one way, if you have some spare time, if you can afford it, that's a really great way to get to know people, to let them get to know you, and also to get experience that you can put on your resume.
Yeah, and I guess I'd also say in conclusion, like just know what your skill sets are, know how to market yourself when you're going to conferences and meeting with people. If you've got some fieldwork experience, if you know how to survey, that's huge. They teach that in geology and watershed. They should teach it in every natural resource major, I think. You don't necessarily have to be, great at all this computer stuff. If you've got a lot of hands-on skills, if you want a field job, stuff like surveying, field work, knowing how to operate machinery and stuff like that. Having GIS, of course, is a huge one. I'd highly recommend taking some GIS classes if you haven't already. I'm assuming most of you have, but if you haven't, that's probably one of the most important things you can do. Surveying is a great skill to have, again. And when you meet with people, just kind of be confident in what your skills are and let them know. Because people, I think because I've hired a couple people by now, and I think more than anything, when you're hiring somebody, you want to be like confident that they're not going to die. You want to be confident that they can get themselves out to their field site in their work truck and get their work done and get back safely with, not only with the data or whatever you're after, but get back safely and be able to problem solve and have a lot of common sense and stuff like that. That seems to have been helpful for me, because I'm certainly not a great mathematician, and I don't have any like super advanced computer skills other than GIS. So
you've never used R?
What's that?
R?
R?
Yeah.
No.
They're trying to get us to learn that right now.
No, I think that's a great idea, if all y'all young or up and comers are coming, if all the undergrads coming out of that building are good at R, then that's not good news for me. Does anybody else have any questions? I think we're a little over time.
Let's give Luke
Thanks,
a
Larry.
round of applause.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
You work here in the Fort Collins office?
Yeah, I do. And I guess we hire a couple seasonals every year. I should probably mention that.
Just for the summers? Or?
Yeah, it's kind of a joke that we have 11.5-month seasonals. Our season goes really long, so typically our seasonals start in like March or April and go through October, and then depending on, how much work, how much reporting and kind of closeout work we have at the end of the season, our seasonals could stay on till Christmas and come back by January 15th if we like them and we have the money for them. So.
And will we engage in that process just through your Facebook, through your webpage?
Yeah, so our positions are advertised every spring, probably around March, on our website, on the Facebook page. And if you're interested in working for WRV, the best thing you can do is come volunteer so that, multiple staff members know who you are and can get comfortable with you. And, like everybody else, we hire from within. We hire the people that we are comfortable with and people that we're confident we can trust. So you know, the game is rigged, unfortunately. But it's definitely, it's also rigged in favor of young people, I think, so. Cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.